Hello friends! I have gotten into my hands the Fujifilm X Pro 3. I borrowed it and this 35mm f2 lens from Fuji, and I will have it for the next several weeks. Many of you have asked about this latest camera body from Fuji, but I wanted to try it because I've never used an X Pro body. I own an X100F and I have used a few other Fuji bodies, but this guy's different. It's a rangefinder style body with interchangeable lenses, and the screen, or lack thereof, on the back of the camera is unique. I won't go into many specifications in this video. I will do an in-depth review of this after I've used it for a bit. Quick background though, if you aren't familiar with Fuji, their entire X series of cameras are APS-C, or cropped sensor cameras, and Fuji really focuses on creating all-around cameras that are enjoyable to use. Okay, let's jump into how I set the camera up when I received it, and then go into my first impressions and photos from my first little photo walk with it. First things first, I put the battery in and charged the camera via USB-C. I put a memory card in the camera. There are 2 memory card slots, but I just put one high capacity card in. It's the fastest SD card that I could get my hands on, which is important when I'm testing out new cameras because I want to make sure to give the camera every chance to be fast and responsive, and I don't want my memory card slowing me down because of the write speed. While the camera was charging, one of the things I do with any new camera is download the manual to my phone. This allows me to look up anything I need to when I'm out in the field, even if that's in the middle of nowhere. Manuals aren't exactly the most riveting material to read, but they are incredibly useful. I formatted the memory card and set up my language and time and date, then made sure the sounds were where I wanted them. Basically, I just don't want my camera to make a lot of sounds, especially beeping every time it focuses. Then I went through the menu to make any changes to settings that I need. When I set it up, I didn't know exactly what I'd be doing with it, so I set it up to the baseline that I kind of just set all of my cameras up to, so it's just easy for me to make adjustments quickly when I pull the camera off the shelf because they're all kind of set the same way. One thing I do with some cameras I review, including Fuji cameras, is to set the camera to record RAW plus JPEG. Fujifilm is known for their film simulations, and I like to share JPEG files using those simulations in my reviews. I like to use lossless compressed for my RAW files whenever I can, and for that film simulation I did leave the most general option, Provia Standard. I also make sure that I have focus peaking turned on. This highlights the in-focus areas when you're manually focusing. I do switch to manual focus sometimes, and I also have a manual focus only lens that I plan to use with this camera. Because I also shoot a lot of video, I made sure that I was in 4K at 30 frames per second, and again, I left the film simulation on standard. A very important thing I do is set up my buttons and dials how I want them. So I made the function button on the front of the camera turn on and off eye autofocus. I want to be able to override eye autofocus when there is a person in my photo, but I'm not actually taking a photo of that person. And then I confirmed that there is a button that will allow me to change the film simulation. That way I can switch it up quickly without having to scroll through any menus. And the last menu item I change is shoot without lens. I turn it on because I have a Voigtlander M mount lens that I will use on this camera with an adapter. It will not work if I don't turn this item on. Okay, let's go to my first time out with the camera. All right, sorry for the phone footage, but this is what we're stuck with right now. I mentioned earlier that I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing. Well, I've decided to come out to a local park that has kind of a variety of foliage and some animals and such. Not that I'm really going to be able to do a lot of animal photography considering that I just have a 35mm lens. I did take a photo already of a bird flying through the sky because the bird was like lit up and the sky actually looked pretty, so it actually worked out. But what I have done is I switched over to the Velvia Vivid film simulation, And I'm in aperture priority, and I'm also in auto ISO, and I'm just, having at it with changing aperture. I also switched over to using the electronic viewfinder with this little guy. You go like this, and it switches from the optical viewfinder, which does have an overlay, to the digital viewfinder. I'm sure I'll talk about all that in the review. That's one of the things I may have mentioned that I like about Fuji, is that it is very customizable how you use it. So you can use it in ways that are more modern, but you can also use it in ways that are more vintage, if you will, like dials on the top of the camera, or the old standby command dials, or you can use an optical viewfinder or an electronic viewfinder. So that's one thing I really like about these. You can really customize them to how you might like to shoot that particular day. Another thing that has struck me as I've been walking around with this is that it is so darn light. It's really nice. I mean, I do have a very small lens on it, but just this body itself is very lightweight, and it reminds me of cameras that I played with when I was young, and film cameras, and yeah, it's really fun to use. What I want to do right now is I have come to an area that has kind of some layers of foliage. We've got some near foliage, some middle foliage, and some foliage that's a little further back. And I am going to just kind of go through some of the apertures so that I can show y'all what the image quality looks like at different apertures on this lens, but also what the depth of field is going to look like at different apertures on a APS-C or crop sensor camera. Now, I did read that the sensor that is in the X Pro 3, this guy, is the same sensor that is in the XT3 and the XT30. So I know that the images are going to be good looking because I've used both of those two cameras, the XT3 and the XT30, and I was very impressed with the image quality on them. All right, another thing I mentioned was the film simulation, right? And I could be changing them up right now. I was actually thinking, oh, I'm going to switch to one of the black and white film simulations. But here's the thing. If you have the camera, you can plug this into your computer and use Fuji's X Pro Studio software, and if you're shooting in RAW, you can apply those film simulations as though you took them in the camera. So I don't really need to be using film simulations on here. It's fun for me. I can see, because I'm using the electronic viewfinder, I can see what I'm getting. I can see the results and how it changes with each film simulation. However, if I didn't want to, I wouldn't have to. Or if I get back to my office and I'm at the computer and I'm like, oh, I really wish I wouldn't have used Velvia Vivid on that one. I wish I would have used a black and white. I could change it because I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG. All right, the sun is definitely starting to go down, but I want to get some video. So I switched it over to video. I'm holding too many things. There's a drive button on the back. So I pressed that and I looked through the viewfinder to the electronic viewfinder and was able to see there's something in the bushes behind me. There's an animal back there. And I was able to see all the way down my list of drive modes to get to video. And then I used the other button. If you'll remember, I saw that this button on the back of the camera is it gets me to different film simulations. So I switched the film simulation for video over to Velvia Vivid. So this camera does not have in-body image stabilization. So for shooting photos with a 35mm lens, I don't care. But I do handheld video quite often in my work. I am going to do some handheld video right now just to show you guys. And then I am going to go over to, there should be a little spot by the water over there, and I will set her up on the old wiggly pod here. And yeah, I shouldn't say wiggly pod. This isn't wiggly. I just called it that because it's funny. That's it. Back to my photos. Okay, I did switch this over to, instead of auto white balance, I switched it over to cloudy white balance because I didn't want it to change during my video. And I am making use of the fold down screen. Ta-da! I also I just took off all of the auto stuff, so I'm actually using, you know, I'm in manual mode. And that's it. I am shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second, well, 29.97 frames per second. And the light is definitely getting low. And I think I'll just hang out here and let this be kind of my last thing. I'll let the light go down and head home and have dinner. So one more thing. I have noticed so far that I have not missed having a rear LCD screen that is out all the time. Not even a little bit so far. I have, however, been using the electronic viewfinder as though it was the rear LCD screen. I've been making, menu changes and using the Q button and everything. I used the Q button to change white balance, for example. And that's all for today, friends. Unsurprisingly, I enjoyed using this camera quite a bit. I always enjoy using Fuji cameras. I don't really know anyone who doesn't. I do have a few outings planned for this weekend, and I will be posting on social media. So if you're interested in seeing more, make sure that you are following me. There will be links down in the description to my accounts and also to this setup if you want to learn more about it ahead of my review. And that's it, everybody. Thanks for watching.